Welcome to Louisiana Heartbeats. I'm Sudie Landry, your host. And with us today, we have Ric Trout. Ric is going to be sharing with us his adventures in screenwriting, and he's going to kind of share the different steps of where he started, why he's writing, what he likes to write, and what he has written. Welcome to the show, Ric.
Thank you for having me.
And I understand that you have a lot going on. How did you get started in doing screenwriting?
Well, it's an interesting story.
All right.
As in most of my regular life, I'm a business consultant, primarily in the healthcare area. I've spent most of my career in healthcare, working for some of the largest corporations in the world. But in 2012, I was involved with a horrible automobile accident.
Oh, wow.
And I went through all kind of therapies to try to improve, but the end result was I couldn't walk hardly for 6 months. And I found myself sitting at the computer and doing the kind of things that I usually do on the computer, but I had a lot of time on my hands. And so what are you going to do with all this time? Well, I always had an interest in writing. I really did. And I had done professional technical writing for some of these large hospital corporations.
Professional what?
Technical writing.
Okay.
In other words, some of these companies, I had a specific role with these companies, but they always needed someone to come in and do a white paper or a position paper on healthcare that would be published in a publication, like a trade magazine or a journal or something like that. So they found me. So I based upon my education, I have a doctorate degree in organizational development. So
Okay, all right.
I have a lot of experience in writing.
Can you talk a little louder?
And one of the I just out of inspiration, one day I was sitting at the computer and it came to me that I should do creative writing. And well, where are you going to start with creative writing? So screenplays were something I was always interested in, but I didn't have the education to do it, but I did have some writing skills. So I studied the profession, and I got all the things that I could find. Some of the greatest authors, I read all their stuff, and I hired a mentor, a screenwriting mentor from the West Coast to help me in the trade, and then hired also a guy that had moved to Erath, Louisiana.
Wow.
From Hollywood, because he married a Louisiana girl, and he was available to do a lot of assistance in that too, so he helped me out in doing that. So that's how I got started.
Well, I'm going to stop you right now because I'm curious. Have you ever written a book?
I have never written a book. Now, I have written articles.
But yet you're writing screenplays.
That's correct.
Wow, have I learned something here today? I thought you had to write a book before you could even consider writing a screenplay.
No, in fact, some of the times it goes the other way around.
It is.
Yeah, some screenwriters want to write books.
Yeah.
And so it works both ways.
Well, it's interesting because you're the first one I've heard say that they're actually writing screenplays and yet have not yet written a book. It's
No,
interesting.
But you will, I have taken a book that was written by someone else.
Yes.
That's called adaptation.
Okay.
And I have written a screenplay off the information that was in that book. Now, to do that, you have to be careful because it has to be in the public domain, which means it's been in existence
Oh, wow.
for a
Yeah.
long period of time.
Right.
And that is what I had developed off of that was really nice. The one I did on that.
Okay, so do we want to go ahead and start talking about like where you're from? You've always been from this area?
Well, I was reared in DeRidder, Louisiana.
Well, yeah, Louisiana boy.
Not too far away, and I went to
Okay.
school down here,
Okay.
and also in Baton Rouge and in Natchitoches, so I have 3 degrees.
Okay, Ric, all right. Did you have to have special education, go through certain college credits or whatever to be able to have this success that you're having as a screen writer?
A lot of people do it that way.
But you didn't?
No.
Wow.
We find that
Awesome.
in the industry, it's full of people that come from different backgrounds, that have different levels of education in the field. I think as the industry moves along, that it's probably more important that you do go to college and get some kind of certificate or degree in film or screenwriting. But I chose the path of going through people that were already in the business and had done this and were experts in it, where I could get that counseling and mentorship and developing the trade.
Well, Rick, you had mentioned earlier in some notes I had that this was a passion of yours, but not your main activity.
Right.
We all have to make a living, so we all
That's
have to have a job.
That's exactly right.
You know, it'd be great if we could earn a living right away by not having to work, but unfortunately, the truth, the reality is this is our passion, and your passion is to continue on with that. As we move into this interview, okay, you said you hired a West Coast screening consultant.
That's correct.
You want to share with us why?
Well, the industry is Hollywood's the West Coast.
Yes.
And if you're going to get somebody that's pretty deep in the business, they're usually associated with West Coast, and that's why I went that route.
Okay, so we haven't talked yet about what you have or you are in the middle of projects of doing. Do you want to go ahead and share with us what you worked on?
Because the first one, and that one took a year.
So you done how many screenplays?
Four and a half.
Wow.
And actually, some people do it quicker than that, but I'm very meticulous about how I do it. And I write in the historical genre.
That's what I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, and that's
Why?
some people don't want to do that, but I have always had a interest and passion in history, and my undergraduate major was in history.
Okay.
And
That makes sense.
that's what I wanted to write in, and I've always read historical stuff all during my life. Just had a strong interest in it. So I wanted to write. And Louisiana is so full of history. I mean,
Wow.
you don't have to look far in Louisiana
Absolutely.
to find and all the nations that came in and settled this great state. Plus the population that was already here, the indigenous
Right.
population of Indians and whatever else. There were just so many here. So there's just story after story that you can write on. And that's
So
what
it
I've
didn't
done.
take long for your creativity to kick in, did it?
No, and the first one,
Well, what's the name of your play?
it's a movie called August Destiny, which means, magnificent destiny. So I wanted to write on this Cajun story, the history of the Cajun people. A lot of people have written history of the Cajun people or the
Right.
Acadian people, but there are gaps in the stories and there's some unknown history. So, granted up front, I'm going to be writing something that's fictional. It's not going to be a
Right, fact.
documentary or
Yeah,
so fact. So, but what I'm trying to do is trying to get about 80% or 85% of actual true history. So I did a lot of research on that the Acadian story, and what came out of that is something I found that I wanted to do something a little bit different, but I wanted to really get the take of the people here in this area, Acadiana, about what really was their understanding of the story, and did they have an emotional attachment to the story. So I went out into the community and I interviewed people, and I interviewed everybody from the oldest granddaddy to the youngest grandchild, and to get their take on it. And I really found some differences of opinion, and some of these are really compelling about what is going to be the legacy of that story. So here's what I found. I found three different groups of people. I found those that you might expect they were probably in the middle age and a little older, that had some attachment to the story, but they didn't know all the details about it, and it wasn't something that they thought about every day. It was just something that they plugged into every once in a while, and particularly was associated with a social event,
Right.
dancing or whatever. Yeah, they plugged into it. Then there were those that had a real passion for it. They knew this story verbatim. They knew everything about it. It was a real central part of their life, and for the most part, that was older people. But there were some younger too. And then there's the people who they didn't know anything. They didn't know this.
They didn't know.
They didn't
huh?
know. They didn't know this story. It didn't mean anything to them. They've heard a little bit from their grandparents, maybe mostly younger people, but there were some older too, that just didn't have that identity with the story. So, based upon that feedback and that information, I felt that I wanted to write something that was compelling, that would keep the interest alive about this great story of these people that came to Louisiana. So that's what I did. In writing the story, I wrote it in such a way that it would do that. When somebody saw this screenplay, they would want to know more about it. they would feel really strongly involved with this.
How long ago did you write this?
This was in 2012.
2012, okay.
Yeah. Now, the other thing about this is that what I discovered in all of my research was that this was a great story, but it didn't have a family face. There was no family that was really traced all the way from France to Acadia, or Nova Scotia,
Right.
on down to Louisiana. There wasn't one. So I created this family to do that and moved them all the way through that
You
story.
created the family.
I created a family.
So you created a family that doesn't really exist but could represent.
That's right. It could represent any family that came from over there. But this family also, I did something special with this. I went over and it took a little bit out of Longfellow's poem, Evangeline.
Oh, okay.
Let me talk a little bit about that.
Yeah,
Because
let's hear
when
something.
when I was interviewing people about this story, I also found that almost an identical situation to something in the poem. A lot of
Well,
people,
looky there.
a lot of people didn't even know read it. Some didn't even know it existed.
Revelation, all of a
Yeah,
sudden,
and,
yay.
And this was written in 1848, and for 17 straight years, it was the #1 seller. And it was required reading in school for many, many years. But it just fell by the wayside. The original writing of that poem is kind of difficult to read because it's like old French translating Old English, so it's kind of difficult. But most people don't like the ending of that story. If you're familiar with it, it's a tragic ending.
Well, I know just enough to know that I didn't like the ending of it. I don't even remember the whole story, but when you mentioned the name,
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, so this screenplay incorporates a little bit of that with a different ending, but also much, much more, because it does parallel the actual history all the way through, plug some gaps where history doesn't know, and rides a family all the way through it.
Wow.
So now, here's what happened. There's several ways to try to get recognition for your play. Now, unfortunately, it's a very competitive business.
Yes,
the,
please share.
Everybody from a college professor to a waitress to a dishwasher thinks they're a screenplay writer, whether they've done it or not. Now, granted, some of them aren't good, but this clogs the pipeline to the desk of the studios. Some of these studios are getting 3,000, 4,000 screenplays a week, and they had to decide which ones they're going to get promoted to the next level.
That must be
and which
one
are not.
major hard decision.
It's a hard decision, and sometimes a good play will not really get the merit that it deserves through that process. So one of the other routes to trying to do this is what we have commonly our screen festivals, film festivals.
Yes.
Now, not all film festivals have a screenplay contest attached to it, but a lot of them do. So I was very fortunate. I entered the 1913 Page International Film Fest, and this is one of the best, one of the most notoriety.
Where was it located?
Well, it's a Hollywood-based thing.
Okay,
but
strictly over in the West
Yeah,
Coast.
there's usually anywhere from 7,000 to 9,000 entries a year in the contest,
Hey,
and they have categories that you're entering into. So this play got honorable mention in that contest. And that's quite an achievement because
It is.
And it wasn't first place, it wasn't second, third, but it did get honorable mention.
well, that's good.
So you would think that alone would get somebody to read it or look at it, but no, it's not necessarily going to be the case.
Wow.
But it was a stroke for me that I felt good about that. And the second thing that happened about that play, and again, once you think that when this happened, it would get some traction, but not necessarily. I had two screenplay people in New Orleans.
Okay.
These are people who have small studios. Now they're usually doing smaller to mid-sized films, and this film is really a big budget film. That's another handicap of trying to get it produced. It's going to be more risk for the producer
I can't see you.
to do this. So the two of these studio houses in New Orleans. The first one, Dr. Mel Claude runs that, and she's been in the industry for a long time. She read the screenplay, called me up, and said it was the best one she's read in 5 years.
Wow.
That was a stroke. That was a good stroke.
That was a good stroke,
Yeah,
yes.
and then another one, it's ran by Murray Roth in New Orleans, and he read it, and he said it had Oscar potential.
So how did that door get opened up? It was through the person that had read and she had told somebody else? I'm
No,
just curious.
interesting enough, that
How?
door was open through May Chapman.
Okay, you see, you never know.
May Chapman is the director of the local film TV meetup group,
Okay.
and she helps a lot of people in the industry, but she got me introduced to those two people, and that's why that came about. But despite that,
Mm-hmm.
despite the fact that they liked it so much,
Right.
and it placed in international competition, I still cannot get it sold and developed. It's just
What do you
it's just-
think needs done? You just keep on not giving up and
You
keep
don't give
waiting
up.
for the right
It
person?
just takes the right pair of eyes to look at it. And a lot of it is networking, and a lot of it is
Oh, yeah.
referral. So if you attend these events, these major film festivals and other Hollywood-type events, now you're restricted by money a little bit because you
Right.
can't go to you can't go to Los Angeles every month.
Right,
So you're
right.
kind of restricted, but more and more stuff is starting to come online now. So you can actually do through your own computer some of the pitches for your film. So it's gradually getting there. And the fact that Louisiana is so big in film now helps out too.
Yes, it does, and I want to kind of interject something too. You just hit on the main thing. If a person has the passion and they have an idea, they don't usually give up on it. But it may not happen tonight or tomorrow, but sooner or later, that right little door will keep on opening. And what you just said, a person in the Writer's Guild, and I'll just briefly say, wrote a book many, many, many years ago, and just happened to share the idea of what he had and how I sent him somewhere, and just so happened, Universal Studios was there, and guess what?
There you go.
There, you just never know,
Never
but it
know.
was not overnight.
Oh,
We're talking like 40 years ago.
wow, that's a long time.
Wow.
I'm gonna
You
have to wait that
see,
long.
me too.
I mean, I'll be here.
But you never, but the whole thing I was gonna say, Rick, is a lot of people want the big, big scene, the end of the big picture, but they're not willing to go out and, you gotta be seen to mingle like me. I attended this meeting and I met you and I'm like, wow, that's something I wanna talk about on the television show. Not only because I'm the president of the Writers Guild, it would also help them because we're looking for speakers on different areas, you know, like, okay, you didn't write it, but you can produce it, you see, which is what I've been asked all the time. Sudie, do you know anybody who could take my story maybe and turn it into a screenplay? So that right there is a
Well, I
plus.
think there's some writers in our group, our meetup group, that would be able to do that other than myself.
That's what I'm saying,
And
though.
further my education, I am a member of the Down South Screenwriters, which
Okay.
is another meetup type program in Baton Rouge.
Wow, okay.
So once a month, we meet over there and we critique each other's writings, and we bring in guests sometimes that have notoriety, that give us clues and hints about
Yes,
screenwriting, which is
yes.
very important. So that's been a very beneficial involvement on my part.
So how far have you gone basically around in the local area to share with people what August Destiny is about?
Well,
How are you getting people to be aware
I
that,
have done it to a certain extent, but one thing you have to be careful about is that even with the best intentions, you cannot expose too much about what you do because it'll be ripped off.
you are so right.
And that's just a fact we have to live with. Now, most of my stuff is copyrighted and also a part of the Writers Guild,
Yes,
which will give you protection for that piece that you wrote. But somebody else can come along with a similar ideal and say it was original with them. So
Yep.
you have to be careful about that.
oh, I know. I did write a book many years ago, and the manuscript got taken to school by my son who wanted to share his mama's story, and a person tried to say that I had written their lives story, and of course, you know the end of the story. I did come out of it not guilty, but it was amazing how someone, you know, thought, oh, well, I'm going to have to pray for those people, because what I wrote about was abuse. So I had to pray. Sooner or later, it all worked
Well-
out. But that was an issue I learned, what you said. You don't just let anybody read your material, because it can change one little item and become theirs.
Now, most of the activity in the state right now is going to be in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Shreveport. Lafayette hasn't yet come up to the level of developing the local films here and doing some wonderful things. And we're limited by, we don't have a studio here. So you want to go to a studio, you have to go to Baton Rouge or New Orleans for the most
So
part.
Baton Rouge or New Orleans has that kind of
Yeah,
setup.
Freeport has it too, but that's a little further away.
Yeah.
So we're gradually building up that type of program here. More and more films are being developed here, and I think our if we went by locations alone, we got some great locations in Acadiana that could really harvest a good film right here now, and there are some starting.
Well, we're starting to see and meet with different people who are from way far away. All of a sudden, they're living here and they have these different credentials. So I'm thinking that Lafayette is starting to get the attention, and maybe one day we'll have that.
Well, I hope so. And there's a lot of
Soon.
a lot of people that
Soon.
that are in all of these different areas where it's costumes or props or directing, all that stuff. They're all here.
Well, Rick, I'm originally just from Shreveport, Louisiana, and believe me, it's a totally different world just those 4 hours away.
Absolutely.
And it's amazing the stories here. So like you said, you can take a story and you can get just history and it becomes an awesome story. And if you're doing the playwright and the screens and all that, it just gets it out there further to the audience out there. Well, we are now into maybe 4 minutes left in the show, so we definitely want to be able to let you cover anything else, like a different genre or something?
Well, I write in the historical genre, but this most recent film that story I'm writing is about the 60s.
Okay.
And while it is kind of historical, that's not the intent. You know, the 60s was full of dynamics. You had your all these rock bands that came out of there, and you had this big social conflict between the Vietnam War and
That's
the
true.
and the hippies and the yippies and that kind of stuff. So that decade was probably the most explosive and interesting decade that over the century, over the last 100 years. It was just that interesting. So what I have done is I've tried to take that what was going on during that time period. Everything from music, you go from the Beach Boys to rock, hard rock.
60s.
And then you have assassinations, political things of John Kennedy, Robert
Yes,
Kennedy,
right.
Martin Luther King,
Right.
and try to build a story off of that with all that passion, all that different interest, but base it on some of the rock stars of that area and what their character was like and what motivated them and what was their goal in life. That's kind of what I've done with that.
What is the name of that one, or do you have a name, or are you
I
still
don't have a name
working
for
on
you.
it?
Don't
Not
have a name for
yet.
it yet. Don't have a name for it.
Wow, when
Yeah.
do you think that might be finished and out to the public? About when?
Probably by the end of this year.
By the end of
Probably
this year?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I'm working on.
And you're classifying it on mainly the Acadiana area, or other than?
No, that's
You need to be in Shreveport then, I think.
that's nationwide. That's
Worldwide.
a whole-
I'm
that's
just
what-
picking.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah,
picking.
okay, all right.
Moving from Shreveport to Acadiana, really totally different
Oh, very much so.
culture and everything,
Yeah.
and I love it. And so,
But I wrote something about the Natchitoches area.
okay,
Yeah, that's
what
a
was
very-
that? Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a very unique area. This is sort of pre-Civil War.
Okay,
And what most people don't know is that there was a little isolated population around the Cane River that was different from anything else in the South, the old antebellum South.
Natchitoches.
This was it was kind of interesting. How much time, do we have a little time here?
Sure,
Okay.
we still got time, don't
This-
worry,
this
don't let
was-
me know.
This was there was plantations along what was the Red River, but then the Red River changed its course and left a 40-mile lake called the Cane River.
Okay,
Well, that was unfortunate for all the plantations that were on the old Red River. Now they couldn't get their crop. They had to transport their crop to the river anymore. They just couldn't load it on the boat.
I remember
They had
something
to
about
take
that.
the carts and get the crop with primary cotton at that particular time. But there was a lot of plantation owners there, and one particular plantation owner was a real wealthy French guy.
okay,
And he lost his wife, and then he married a slave.
okay.
And when he died, she inherited all of his property. And she was a smart cookie. And she also found the new governor was coming at that time. We had land grants.
Right.
So lo and behold, she sews up almost the whole 40-mile valley and all the plantations and became the queen of the Cane River.
Well, I'm happy for her and the
Yeah.
history. Well, listen, we're really getting to the end of the show. You want to kind of say something about the community involvement that you're with?
Well,
What do you do?
I still do most of my work as a business consultant.
Okay.
But I am involved with some community initiatives. We have a budding technical hub here. And,
Okay.
working with some folks that are trying to create a technology center here that's world-class and bring in a lot of partners to make that happen. And part of that is an investment piece.
Okay.
So we're trying to establish an angel investing network
Okay.
and some other sources of funding to make this thing work.
Okay, real quickly, before we start seeing the rolling credits, what about this future writing? You want to kind of do different topics?
Well, it kind of gets
You
back to.
mentioned riverboats in
Yeah,
Mississippi.
I have a love for riverboats. Who doesn't?
That's
You know, the
it.
old riverboats, it covers a lot of period there, but my focus is going to be right again pre-Civil War and what was happening to the riverboats. Because a lot of those riverboats, they stocked at the plantations in Louisiana. There's some interesting stuff
Wow.
going on.
Well, we're going to end this show right now, and I want to tell everybody out there that if you're interested, check out his email, and if you have any questions, let him hear from you. You've been watching Louisiana Heartbeats. I'm Sudie Landry, and I am the host, and the guest tonight was Ric Trout, is Ric Trout, and probably will be coming back future so he can share with us that his big break and the big door opened
We were
up.
happy to.
And he is a screenplay writer. So tune in every Tuesday night at 9 o'clock. It just might be You Are Rick that we're showcasing. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.